viewers, Budge Investor here. How are we today? Hope everything's going good. It's been a while since my last video. Life gets in the way and all that, but let's leave it at that and get straight into it today. Let's take a look at what it means to be a millennial in 2021. Now, I'm sure each and every one of you already has their opinions on how easy or hard millennials have it these days, depending on basically which generation you come from. But rather than comparing lifestyles that are 50 years apart, I thought we'd take a look at what are some of the key issues today, mainly impacting people like myself, millennials. So, why don't we take a quick 30 seconds to look at what wealth in New Zealand looks like right now. 60% of the adult population have less than $10,000 of cash in the bank. I know I've never had more than $10,000 of cash in the bank. I'm not sure the most amount I've ever had, maybe just over 5, but I definitely fall into this camp and I consider myself not that badly off. Property is also our biggest investment class, with about 45% of the country's wealth tied up in property. And I know that includes myself as part of that as well, again. And business assets, believe it or not, only account for 18% of overall wealth in the country and are limited to the top 50% of the wealthy population. That's quite a surprising stat. It's quite low overall, which shows you just proportionately the difference between the value in business in New Zealand and the value of its property. So, what's the state of the New Zealand economy as a whole? Well, in the last 10 years, we've been some of the craziest economic times in history, let's put it like that. The global economy has gone through one of the worst downturns just over a decade ago. The GFC was the worst downturn basically since the Great Depression. We're seeing countries moving away from promoting global trade to being now more focused on looking after their own interests in the form of protectionism. On top of that, there are some big changes coming with the digital economy growing, impacting the future of jobs, housing affordability, and what does the shape of retirement look like? And, well, we all know because we're still dealing with it, but the last 15 months we've been reacting to a pandemic that's currently shifting the goalposts on these three topics quicker than they were already moving. It's just hyper-accelerated everything. So those are a lot of the key things going on, but what is it that we should be thinking about? Well, as millennials, here are my 3 key takeaways. Consumerism has boomed in the last 50 years. We now have more choices and products than we know what to do with, really. It's so easy to get caught up in the hype of buying new things, upgrading your phone every year to the latest iPhone, make sure you have the latest flat screen TV and those Nike kicks on that make you super fly down the street. However, we're spending more and living longer, and this is a really big problem. It means we're going to need more money than any other generation out there. And looking at that, looking at life expectancy, the current life expectancy for millennials is going to be 90 years old. This is 3 years longer than the baby generation, for example. And on top of it, there's a high risk that the New Zealand government superannuation scheme, wow, that's a mouthful, will go through many more changes before then. I mean, a lot of questions are asked, will it even be around? Saving and investing will be key in making sure that we have the money we need to enjoy long, happy, and healthy lives. Well, we can't talk about investing in New Zealand without addressing the housing market, of course. New Zealanders have always had a strong attraction to invest in housing. It's seen as an easy, risk-free investment. But is that true anymore? I don't know. While New Zealand house prices only fell by around 8% on average following the global financial crisis, or the GFC, in other countries, house prices declined as much as 60% in that fallout. So imagine now if you go out and buy your $600,000 house, and then next year it's only worth $240,000. That actually happened in some cities overseas. And while that example may seem pretty extreme here in New Zealand, the point to remember is what goes up can come back down. There's also the obvious risk of a natural disaster occurring any time in New Zealand, destroying your property, or a change in circumstances forcing you to sell your property potentially at a loss when you don't want to. And while you can insure against some of these circumstances, it all just adds to the cost of ownership, along with rates, maintenance, sometimes body corporate fees, and a whole bunch of other things that come with owning a house. The cost of ownership is not as cheap as you might think. With house prices at very elevated levels already, especially by comparing it to other international countries, we have one of the most expensive housing markets in the world. It is very much worth thinking carefully about betting it all on the house these days, particularly as mortgage rates will start to increase eventually in the future. You need to really ask yourself if you can really afford that property you're buying. And not just if you can afford it right now, but how about if your plans change? Perhaps you want to move overseas when the borders open, and then you'd be renting out your house. Would that rent cover the mortgage while you're away? Will it cover the mortgage if mortgage rates go up to, 5, 6, 7%? Or if you're wanting to have kids or start a business and want to drop to one income or even no incomes, will you be able to cover the cost of that loan? Property is a long-term investment, and we should really think of it as such. We should think about our life in the long term alongside it. So it might not quite be the right time for everyone to jump into the housing market, but that doesn't mean that you should be living hand to mouth and spending everything you earn either on this, that, and whatever. There is a world of other investments out there that aren't to do with property. Or perhaps if you still want, you can gain indirect exposure to the ups and downs of the property market without putting every last drop of your savings into an actual house. In New Zealand, the share market is often seen as highly risky. And many of our parents' generation got burnt by the 1987 stock market crash, which has kind of led to this misconception. But if we were to go look back in hindsight now being such a wonderful thing, if you invested $100 in the S&P 500, which is one of the main US stock traded indexes, back in 1980, it'd be worth about $2,140 now, ignoring the exchange rate, of course, because you would have to buy this in US dollars. But if you invested $100 in a New Zealand house over that same time, it would be worth about $833 now. So even with the big ups and the massive downs and crashes, all that volatility, there are still potential gains to be made in the long term when it comes to shares, and that's very important to keep in mind. And so that's where I'm going to wrap it up today. We'll leave you on that note. Just remember, as always, give the video a like or a share. Subscribe, make sure to do all that. It really helps the video. If you've got any comments, leave them. I'd love to have a chat. Anything that crops up into your mind, hit me with it. I love it. And until the next video, stay safe out there and happy investing.